Rain outlines your fate. Let me leave you a...
Scatter!
Hey y'all, welcome to my Alhaitham guide as of Genshin Impact 3.7. This guy is an extremely powerful Dendro carry? Driver? On-fielder. He's got to be one of the best or just the best main on-field damage carriers due to his half hyper carry and half quick swap playstyle. Being Dendro also helps him because he actually synergizes with elemental reactions unlike Shower or Ito. Sure, this can make him less universal, but Dendro is ridiculously overpowered for most of the content in the game. So, in this guide, I'll be covering everything you need to know about Alhaitham. Let's get right into his process of elimination. Starting with his talents. His normal attack, let's actually just skip those and move on to his elemental skills since they tie into that, and besides, the normal attacks on their own are just physical hits that you shouldn't particularly be using. Alhaitham's elemental skill is the main part of his gameplay. See, Alhaitham's main gimmick is his Chisel Light Mirrors, and using a skill will give you 2 of them. I'll just be calling them mirrors for simplicity's sake. These mirrors will convert Alhaitham's normal, charged, and plunging attack to do Dendro damage, as well as having coordinated attacks every 1.6 seconds based on both Alhaitham's attack and elemental mastery stat when you use one of those 3 attacks. This is what I meant by his normal attacks connecting from his skill. These mirrors have a stacking mechanic that multiplies the damage you do by up to 3 times. Each stack has an independent timer of 4 seconds for every stack level. That being said, your main goal for Alhaitham's damage is to keep 3 mirrors for as long as possible. When you cast his elemental skill, he teleports forward and gains 2 mirror stacks if you have none. However, the skill also has a hold version that you can aim, which comes in helpful for his Ascension 1 passive. This passive gives Alhaitham the ability to gain a mirror stack if he lands a charged or plunging attack once every 12 seconds. So depending on the situation, you may want to generate a mirror after losing one, or gaining all of them right away to have a strong start on your next rotation. It really depends on your situation, but this passive is nice for elongating your time with 3 mirrors. Moving on to Alhaitham's burst, he will do damage and generate new mirrors depending on the number of mirrors he has when casting it. Here you will see a list of the number of hits you can get for each stack of mirrors that you have. Ignore them completely if your Alhaitham isn't C6. You're really only going to be using the 4-hit version. The purpose of Alhaitham's burst before C6 is mainly as a second way of getting mirror stacks, since you get 3 if you cast his burst when he has 0. When you cast his burst, you have a 2-second window before he gets the mirror stacks. During this time, you can stay on him and attack or swap out to quickly use a support's ability. Be careful though, because if you don't swap back to Alhaitham in time, he doesn't get the mirror stacks. I'll be diving more into this in the combo section. Lastly, Alhaitham's A4 passive basically gives a buff to his projection attack and burst damage by 0.1% for every point of elemental mastery he has. This passive maxes out when he has 1000 elemental mastery. This further screams at you to build more EM on him since it's good for reactions anyways. Pretty good passive overall. If you're wondering which talents to level first, start with Alhaitham's elemental skill, since the mirror projection attacks make most of his damage. Second are his normal attacks due to their Dendro infusion property, and lastly his burst. Now that you know what he does and how, let's go into how you can build Alhaitham to maximize his damage. First things first about his build. Alhaitham is Dendro, meaning that the biggest buff you can give to his damage is maxing out his level. For his artifact sets, Alhaitham prefers any mix of elemental mastery or Dendro damage bonus effects. Options include 4-piece Gilded Dreams for maxing out elemental mastery gain, any pairs of 2-set effects that give EM or Dendro damage bonus, and finally 4-piece Deepwood Memories if no one else on the team is holding it. He's Dendro, so anything that buffs EM or Dendro damage is great, and as for the Deepwood 4-piece, it shreds the Dendro resistance of enemies hit by his elemental skill, aka his mirrors. Now that the sets are out of the way, let's talk about main stats and substat priorities. This section will be longer, I swear. For Alhaitham's traditional spread or hyper bloom build, he will prefer elemental mastery on his sands, Dendro damage bonus goblet, and lastly a crit circlet for whichever crit you have less of. If you don't have an EM sands, you can use an attack percent one to hold you over instead. For his substat priority, get enough energy recharge on him so that you can burst with him either every rotation or every other rotation, since it'll help you maximize the uptime on his mirror stacks. His ER requirement can vary a lot with the teammates he has. The general number is somewhere in the ballpark of 130 to 160%. Next is elemental mastery, crit is after, and to top it off, you can also make use of any stray rolls of attack percent you might get on your pieces. So, that's his artifacts. What weapons should you use on him? Alhaitham will want any weapons that have EM, crit, or ER as its secondary stat, since those stats play to his strengths best. Starting from the cheapest, moving up. For your 3-star option, we have Harbinger of Dawn. Easily refinable stat stick. Gives a 46.9% crit damage stat when leveled to 90, and can give 28% crit rate when the wielder is above 90% HP at max refinement. You may want to run a shield character with him to make full use of this passive. Let's move on to the 4-star category. For your 4-star options, they actually open up a little bit more. Harbinger of Dawn is certainly an okay choice for a weapon, but should you have any sword builds, use this one instead. The Iron Sting. Not only does it give the wielder 165 EM, but also increases the damage on everything they do after dealing elemental damage twice. Not hard for Alhaitham to do. There are other 4-star options, but I wanted to go with Iron Sting first since it was the cheapest. Tokubo Shigure, released during version 3.3, performs similarly to Iron Sting in single target scenarios or when you're able to kill enemies within 15 seconds of the last one. The Favonius sword can be a good option if you're strapped for energy on Alhaitham, giving you energy particles when you crit. Sacrificial sword works a bit differently on Alhaitham since it gives the option of using his burst with mirrors as well as helping a bit more with his energy requirement. Zephos Moonlight can be seen as the happy medium between EM, main stats, and ER requirement since it converts a portion of his total EM to ER. Festering Desire, from all the way back in version 1.2, is pretty much on par with Zephos because of its elemental skill damage boost, which includes Alhaitham's projection attacks. Last but not least is the Black Sword. Decent crit rate stat stick and occasional healing on hit. Those are pretty much all the notable 4-star options, so let's go into the 5-star ones. Light and Full Year Incision will be Alhaitham's best weapon option for maximizing DPS. High crit damage stat to more than make up for the fact that he doesn't ascend on it, and an effect that increases normal attack and elemental skill damage based on the wielder's total EM. Completely playing to Alhaitham's strength in building EM, and primarily using those attack types, since his mirrors are tied to it. The cooldown on this effect doesn't really matter too much either, since you'll be keeping him off field during that time anyways. Second is the Primordial Jade Cutter. It offers a high crit rate stat and an unconditional attack increasing passive that scales on max HP. Not much else to say, just a good stat stick. Both of these weapons have the lower 542 total base attack for a 5-star weapon, but since Alhaitham's damage split scales with both attack and EM, it's not a big deal. Next up are the Mist Splitter Reforged and Haran Gippaku Futsu. Even though they give different buffs, you'll end up getting similar results from one to the other. Alhaitham's last recommended weapon is Freedom Sworn. Since it is the partner weapon to the Lo-Fi in this current banner rotation, you'll have a very real chance of getting it if you are wishing on it. Although worse than the other 5-star options, it's still slightly better than the 4-star swords. Can give a nice party-wide buff, but if you've got the other ones, use those instead. So now you've got the talents and build down. What's left to upgrade? Why, his Constellations, of course. Don't. They're not worth whatever Prima Gems or money you throw at them. They're either too small of a boost to matter or too expensive for the good one. But you're probably going to ignore what I just said if you love the character. So, fine, let's go through them and see what you're getting. Constellation 1 gives you more room to f**k up. That's basically all it does. Each projection attack that lands will reduce Alhaitham's skill cooldown by 1.2 seconds. Oftentimes, the reduced cooldown won't make much of an impact unless you need to panic swap out of Alhaitham. Other times, if you're trying to squeeze in the extra skill usage, you'd run into problems of support abilities not being up and just f**king you over your rotation as a whole. All in all, C1 just serves as a timing cushion in case you mess anything up. C2 gives Alhaitham 50 EM for 8 seconds whenever he generates a mirror, up to 4 times, giving it a total of 200 EM. Nice buff, doesn't mess up his usual rotations, but not particularly worth going for since you can get that buff externally. C3 and 5 give 3 talent levels to a skill and burst respectively. Alhaitham's C4 description is a bit of a mouthful, so I'm gonna simplify it. You see these numbers? Yeah, he'll buff your party's EM for every one of those. And the other numbers? He'll give himself dendro damage bonus for those. Alhaitham's C6, the only good constellation. Too bad it's so late at C6. With this constellation, regardless of the number of mirrors consumed when Alhaitham uses his burst, he will always regenerate 3 mirrors back. Also, if he overcaps on mirrors, he gets an increase to his crit rate by 10% and a crit damage by 70% for 6 seconds. If you overcap it with another mirror, that buff will last another 6 seconds. This opens up the playstyle of opening it with his burst and using a skill immediately after to maximize the time on the buffs. To wrap up his constellations, they're not worth it. Unless you're going straight to C6, there's really no point. Just get C0 and his weapon, if you want to, and save. And heck, legend says that Alhaitham's best constellation is actually Nahida C2, and it turns out to be completely true. Well, you know how Alhaitham works, but what team archetypes is he good in? Alhaitham is Dendro. Need I say more? Okay, well, this is a guide, so I guess I will. Quicken, Nilo Bloom, Hyper Bloom, and Burgeon are his staple team choices. They all do about the same in terms of damage, so it'll just depend on what characters you have or which archetype you prefer. For Quicken, pair him with at least one fast electro applicator such as Fischl, Beidou, Yaimiko, or Lisa. The rest of the slots can be characters to fill roles like backup Dendro application, healing, or shielding. Hyper Bloom uses an Electro and Hydro character along with Alhaitham, capping off the team setup with a flexible slot, preferably another character with some defensive support. Some characters that are preferred for this team are Xingqiu and Yelan as your Hydro applicators. Xingqiu offers better Hydro application and sustainability, whereas Yelan's Hydro application is less potent, but buffs the damage dealt by the on-field character. In this case, Alhaitham. Top Electro characters for this team are Raiden or Shinobu. Raiden gives you a longer lasting Electro application upon enemies taking damage, as well as a panic button for when your team doesn't have their bursts up. And Shinobu can heal your active character while applying Electro. Burgeon is more or less the same team structure. Alhaitham with a Hydro and Pyro character, then a flexible slot. Hydro characters are still Xingqiu and Yelan. As for your Pyro applicator, Toma will be your best option since he works completely from off-field, applying Pyro as well as giving your active character a shield to kind of mitigate the damage you're taking from burgeoning your Dendro cores as well as interruption resistance. Last slot can be a healer like Yaya or Kokomi, and no, I will not mention Dia. Important thing to know about the Electro character in Hyper Bloom and the Pyro in Burgeon, level them to 90 for their respective reaction and try to get as much EM on them as possible to maximize their reaction. In the case of Shinobu or Toma, they also appreciate some HP and ER to help with their other supportive roles. Nilo Bloom is very tight in its team structure, but still good regardless. Obviously, Nilo Bloom needs Nilu. Then you can put in another Dendro and or Hydro, whatever characters fit the roles you need, especially a healer since playing Nilo Bloom can make your on-field character take a lot of damage with all the cores exploding. Some good Dendro characters include Nahida or Yao Yao, and with Hydro, some good options are again Xingqiu, Yelan, or Kokomi. Let's now go through some good characters for your flexible slots. Zhongli is always a decent option, gives a shield, resistance shred on all elements, a stun, and should you use it, the force set effect of the tenacity set. Kazuha or Sucrose, nice support buffers that either buff elemental damage bonus or EM. While not as effective for Alhaitham himself since Dendro can't be swirled, they can both still buff your support's damage. In this section, I'll be going over some general combos you can use for Alhaitham. Due to how his stacking mechanic works, there are specific attacks you should use at specific times to maximize his damage, so I'll be going through a few examples to hopefully ease you into the character. Alhaitham can either start rotations with a skill or burst. If the cooldown is over, the burst is generally better to start with, but his skill is fine as well. For this section, there's a lot of words I'm about to throw at you, and it might sound super complicated, but trust me, when you actually go to play it, it's not super hard to get the rhythm of. I'll leave a condensed version of the sequence of the combos I'm going through on screen. Let's start with the first combo, which can be seen as the standard one. Start with Alhaitham's burst, and from here you can start attacking or swap out to use another character's abilities. Remember that you need to swap back to Alhaitham within 2 seconds if you do this. From here, use his normal attacks for 4 seconds or until you see a mirror stack go away. Then use his skill to get a mirror back, attack for 4 seconds again, then use the charged attack to get back up to 3, and use up your last string of attacks, swap out, then recast your support abilities to start the next rotation. Next up is the shortened standard combo, wherein you use his burst first, immediately connecting to a skill, use his normal attacks for 5 seconds or so, refresh a mirror stack with a charged attack, and finished off the rest of the combo. This combo is pretty much used as quick damage, and then you swap him off, but may make any rotations afterwards feel a little awkward. The third combo I'll be covering is if you're in a situation without Alhaitham's burst. You can start off with either his held skill into plunging attack, which generates 3 mirrors and activates the 3 mirror projection attack on the plunge, or use tap skill into an N1C if you mess up the plunge variant. Afterwards, use normal attacks for the rest of the mirrors. These 3 are all really good combos to pull off with Alhaitham to maximize both his Dendro application and personal damage. Not only that, but they also account for multiple situations should you not have one of his burst or elemental skill off cooldown. But I can understand if you want to see how they actually work in a proper battle. So let's do a showcase. For this showcase, my Alhaitham will be at level 90, holding a Refinement 1 Iron Sting, also at level 90. He'll be using a split 2-set of Deepwood Memories and Gilded Dreams at level 686 for his talents. Here are his stats. Without further delay, let's see him in action. Roll the clips.
Hold the line. The process of elimination. There is no escape. Busted. Game's up. Time's over.
let's wrap up this video. Alhaitham is an amazing Dendro on fielder that plays to his teammates' strengths instead of being a selfish asshole. He can apply Dendro pretty quickly and dish out a lot of damage whilst doing so. He's got the whole collection of Dendro related teams that he can excel in without too many steps to get there. Leave a like and comment down below if this guide was helpful to you. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you back for another video. See ya.